if you're walking a path of spiritual self-development, you are going to die many, many deaths. You're going to experience many deaths, and you are going to experience many rebirths that are a result of these deaths. And you will kind of go into this death energy cycle, and eventually, at some point in time, you will experience a rebirth. And with this rebirth, maybe different belief systems, a slightly or maybe even a major shift in the way you view the world, and a new sense of self identity, potentially a sense of self identity that's more in resonance with the source energy consciousness within yourself. And every death cycle that you experience, you're going to experience more life. You're going to experience more creativity. You're going to experience more of the source energy consciousness that you came into the world with, but you kind of fragmented from and got separated from being able to access that on a conscious level, to where your belief systems, perceptions, thought patterns, actions, and sense of self identity are in alignment with that. And when you're going through a death cycle, you have to die to the old timeline, and you have to die to the old self. This is something that can be very painful, because you thought that you were that version of yourself. And although that version of yourself served the purpose, it's not bad or it's not wrong. You are no longer meant to attach to that, which is when the death energy comes in to dissolve your identification with that version of yourself and to dissolve the attachment that you have to it. And oftentimes, when we're talking about going through a death cycle, there are going to be heavy emotions that come to the surface, because from children, due to trauma that we experience, we create these protective adaptations that are running on these protective programs that can basically come in the form of different beliefs and identities that we uphold throughout our life experience. So when we're going through that death cycle and we're dying to the version of ourself that is comprised of the identity, the persona and the belief constructs, well, all of the emotions that we were using that to avoid are now coming flooding to the surface to give us an opportunity to be with those emotions, to feel through those emotions. And by feeling through the emotions, we're healing through the trauma that those emotions are actually in connection with. And we're building a deeper connection with our inner child. And this is the version of us that we access more of when we start to move into the rebirth phase of the death cycle, or that's contrasting to the death cycle that we just experienced. Our inner child self is the version of us that was holding that source energy resonance that we're wanting to get back in touch with. But we've built a lot of different layers over this version of ourself, due to early childhood trauma, which is now coming to the surface as a natural byproduct of the death energy. And we create these versions of ourselves that are meant to help us survive that trauma. So in many ways, there's like a grieving process of that old version of you, that the death energy current is kind of moving you into the direction of letting go of. So not only is there these, we can say, very heavy emotions, anger, fear, anxiety, whatever it might be, that are coming to the surface, but there's also like an added grief, because we thought that that version of us once upon a time was authentic to who we really are. And although it served the purpose, it was not in harmony with our most aligned path. So it's kind of like standing over yourself, and essentially you're burying yourself, and you're telling that version of you goodbye. And this grieving process can actually take some time to essentially process and to get out of your system. It's almost like burying, to some extent at least, like a loved one or a family member that you were very identified with, connecting with, except what you're burying is a version of yourself that you once accepted as you, but it had to die because it wasn't, and you needed to make room within yourself to be a more authentic version of you. So this is a very deep process of feeling that we are talking about when we're interacting with death energy, and we're experiencing what is known as a death cycle, so we can eventually move into a rebirth. And then guess what? From that space of rebirth, at some point, if you're being authentic to who you really are and you're honoring your process, at some point there is going to be another death. And spiritual self-development, contrary to popular belief, is actually about building a healthy relationship with death. Because what death really is actually change. And the universe is an ever evolving, I think I can say, sentience. And because you are the universe and the entirety of it is existing inside of you, your natural path of alignment is not something that's, just straight and narrow. It is something that is winding. It is something that is ever changing, meaning you have to be ever changing as well. And you have more of a capacity to do this as you are building a relationship with death, as you are allowing yourself to go through those death cycles, as you are allowing the sometimes very difficult, very painful emotions and memories from your past to come up, and as you're allowing yourself to let go of the old version of you that once upon a time did serve a purpose, but now you are being called to let that go, and that's okay. Allow yourself to grieve it, and allow yourself to trust the process that it's time to let that go. And it's time to step into a more aligned path. And this can be difficult as well, because when we were that old version of us, oftentimes we build certain relationships. Oftentimes we build certain connections and friendships with people. But if they're more so in resonance with that old self, you may find when you go into a death cycle that to move into the rebirth, you have to let go of some of these friendships. And that's not something that's clear cut and always something that's clean, easy, and smooth to go through, because a lot of times we don't know we need to let go of those friendships. And this is when we manifest conflict. This is when we manifest painful words. This is when we manifest difficult experiences with the other person. And this is usually what kind of moves us in the direction of having to let go of that friendship, because once again, it's the old us that's identified with it, but it's not necessarily meant to come with us into that rebirth cycle when we're going to experience a different version of us. We can even say a different timeline. And in this timeline, that person or those people are no longer our friends. And even if there's a falling out that initiates this, that's okay. You don't need to hate the person. If they did say some mean or hateful things to you during that fallout, of course you hold them accountable, but you understand that it's all a part of the process. And if you are angry, allow yourself to feel that anger or whatever else you feel. This is a very important part of the death cycle, but you don't need to hold a grudge against that person, and you don't need to necessarily hold that against them. You can just go your separate way in a peaceful way, knowing that it's all a part of the divine plan, that you have orchestrated for yourself, even though on a conscious level, maybe it's not what you were intending to manifest. On a deeper subconscious, unconscious level, this is your divine will, and this is why it is happening. So, when you're on the spiritual path, there will be many different deaths that you have to embrace, and this is okay. Death is your friend, and death is a beautiful thing. And there's so much power when you allow yourself to embrace these death cycles. In fact, there is a mass collective programming that goes into making you think death is evil and making you fear death, because there are people in power that want to stay in power, and they're operating from a very sociopathic and narcissistic kind of energetic resonance, and they understand that there's power in death, and that if you embrace it, you will step into your power in a way where you can no longer be controlled. You can no longer kind of be, guided along like a sheep, looking for some external form of validation. You become all that you need. You become your own validation, and you truly become a sovereign being when you are connecting with death, and you're allowing yourself to die. You're allowing yourself to go to these darker spaces within your psyche, where your inner child is existing. You're processing those deeper wounds. You're releasing those energies that are trapped in your body, keeping you in a in a timeline where you can be controlled, and you're stepping into your power, and you're stepping into your authenticity in a very profound way. But once again, to do this, you are going to have to die many times.